بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Is fast of Ashura near Ahl Sunnah as well as their scholars. In this regards, I will take maybe 10 minutes at max to go ahead and point out some of the ahadith that I had mentioned earlier by the Mufti of Saudi Arabia and the Mufti from Zahedan. Those two Muftis, their opinion based on the hadith that they had talked about, and what is our take on those ahadith. First hadith is that this was a practice before Islam. Even in the time of Jahiliyyah, this was something which was being done. And so this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, volume 2, page number 250, hadith number 2002. It says, An Aisha, قالت كان يوم عاشوراء تصومه قريش في الجاهلية. The day of Ashura, Quraysh used to fast. Even in Jahiliyyah, in the time of ignorance, they used to fast. وكان رسول الله يصومه. And even Rasulullah used to fast. فَلَمَّا قَدِمَ الْمَدِينَةِ صَامَهُ. When he came to Medina, he fasted. وَأَمَرَ بِصِيَامِهِ. And he ordered people to go ahead and fast. فَلَمَّا فُرِضَ رَمَضَانَ تَرَكَ يَوْمَ عَاشُورَى. When Ramadan became wajib, because it came, the obligation of fasting in the month of Ramadan was in Medina. He said when Ramadan's fast became wajib, تَرَكَ يَوْمَ عَاشُورَى فَمَنْ شَاءَ صَامَهُ وَمَنْ شَاءَ تَرَكَهُ. Whoever wanted to fast, they would fast. Whoever didn't want to fast, they wouldn't fast. So in other words, this hadith tells us that it was a practice prior to Islam. That means Rasulullah in his time when he was living in Makkah, 13 years that he spent after Islam in Makkah. So prior to Islam and after Islam had come, 13 years in Makkah. And then once he migrated into Medina, even in Medina he used to fast and he ordered people to fast until the ayat that I recited, Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, was revealed and fasting became wajib. He continued fasting. Then at that time he stopped fasting. It was matruk at that point. According to this hadith, it was matruk. Matruk means it became something which was abandoned. But those who wanted to fast, they would fast. Those who didn't want to fast, they wouldn't fast. That's one hadith. Let's look at the same thing from Sahih Bukhari, right on the same volume, page 251, hadith 2004. That was hadith 2002. This is hadith 2004. So see how close they are. Yet look at the distance between the two as far as the contradiction is concerned. This hadith says, حدثنا Abu Muammar, حدثنا Abu al-Waris ila akhir. It says Ibn Abbas is the last chain of the narrator. He says, قدم النبي Medina. Prophet came to Medina. فرأى اليهود تصوم يوم عاشوراء. He saw Jews fasting on the day of Ashur. فقال ما هذا. In Arabic, if you know some Arabic, when a person says ما هذا, that means they do not have any clue about it. They're completely clueless and they're astonished and they're surprised. And you say, what is this? And literally, if you see something out of ordinary, you say, what is this? That is what ma hadha is. This is the word of hadith. فَقَالَ مَا هَذَا. What is this? قَالُوا هَذَا يَوْمٌ صَالِحٌ. This is a very, a kind or good day. And therefore, هَذَا يَوْمٌ نَجَّ اللَّهُ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. This is the day when Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given salvation to Bani Israel, the children of Israel, min aduwwihim, from their enemies. فَصَامَهُ Musa. And therefore, Hazrat Musa fasted on this day. قال Rasulullah. Rasulullah then said, فَأَنَا أَحَقُّ بِمُوسَى مِنْكُمْ فَصَامَهُ وَأَمَرَ بِصِيَامِهِ. He said, then I am closer than you to Hazrat Musa. He fasted and he told others to fast. Now compare these two hadiths. Volume 2, page 250, 251. Hadith 2002, Hadith 2004. One hadith from Hazrat Aisha saying that Rasulullah used to fast in the time of Jahiliyyat as well. He fasted even after Islam was brought in. 13 years in Makkah when he lived, he fasted. After migration, he fasted until the ayat was revealed and then he stopped fasting and it was matruk. This hadith, only two hadiths later, from another companion, Ibn Abbas, hadith says that Rasulullah came to Medina, saw Jews fasting, questioned with astonishment and surprise, what is this? As if he did not know what is happening. So he had no clue about it. What do you see between these two hadiths? One is saying Rasulullah used to fast. Second hadith is saying that Rasulullah had no idea about the fast on the day of Ashura. How do you combine these two? Well, the first hadith, if you look at the books of Rijal of Ahl Sunnah, we see, for example, Ibn Quttan, or we see, for example, Zahabi. What do they talk about? That first hadith. In the first hadith, there's a person by the name Hisham ibn Urwa. He said, Hisham ibn Urwa, he says, Quttan says, إِنَّهُ اِخْتَلَتَ وَتَغَيَّرَ. He says, Hisham was someone who mixed the ahadith and he changed the ahadith. Zahabi, another big Rajali, he says, إِنَّهُ نَسِيَ بَعْضَ مَحْفُوظِهِ أَوْ وَهِمَا. He forgot many of his things that he had memorized, and then he imagined a lot of things. These are two of the major Rijalis from the Ahl Sunnah who are giving their opinion about Hisham ibn Urwa. Hisham ibn Urwa, who is one of the transmitters of that first hadith which said Rasulullah used to fast in the Zaman al-Jahiliyyat, fasted during the period of Islam in 13 years, and fasted until this ayat was revealed in Medina. This hadith, on the other hand, is by Ibn Abbas, which says Rasulullah had no idea about it until he came to Medina. And then once he saw the Jews doing this, he went ahead and fasted, and he told others to fast as well. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So even in their ahadith, we see that there's matruk, istark after the wujub of Ramadan. That is something, a similarity that you see in our hadith and in their hadith as well. I have that hadith in front of me as well, but I won't go into details. This is also in Sahih Bukhari, volume 2, page 226, hadith 1892, which talks about that how they had this thing about the fasting, وَأَمَرَ بِصِيَامِهِ, but فَلَمَّا فُرِضَ Ramadan tureka. As soon as Ramadan became wajib, this practice was abandoned and it was no longer practiced. Now, the point that we want to derive and bring ourselves closer to, it says in another hadith, and this is the whole concept of ahadith. And again, you can't leave the ahadith. Why? Because Prophet said, I leave behind you, Quran and Ahlul Bayt. And then in regards to the ahkam fiqh, we have 4 things that we rely upon: Quran and the hadith of Rasul. As long as something is cleared and accepted and understood through Quran, hadith is no longer required. But if you cannot solve something through Quran, which you cannot even solve praying 5 times a day through Quran, there's only timings, but there's no method mentioned there. How do you learn how to fast? You learn through the hadith of Rasulullah. He says, pray as you have seen me praying. How do you perform the qunut? How do you go into the ruku? How do you do the sujood? What do you do this? Where you do this? All of those things we learn from Rasulullah as far as his hadith is concerned. So you can't leave a hadith either. And therefore, this hadith business is very, very important. We see that Prophet, according to one of these hadiths, ordered about fasting, but he himself never did. This hadith right here in Majma'uz Zawaid, Haythami in volume 3, page 186 says this: Amara bi sawmi Ashura, anna Rasulullah, indeed Prophet Muhammad, Amara bi sawmi Ashura, ordered about fasting on the day of Ashur, wa kana la yasumuhu, but he himself never used to fast. How is it that you associate something with Rasulullah that he's ordering other people to do, but he himself was not performing that action? Sort of like the prayer our brothers Ahl Sunnah performed during Ramadan, which was established by the second Khalifa, that he said it was a bid'atun hasana, it was a good bid'at. So there are different types of bid'at. It was a good bid'at, but he never himself, history cannot prove that he himself performed this. He himself never performed it. Kind of like the same thing which Majmu' Zawaid Haythami is saying, that Prophet ordered people to fast on Ashur, but he himself never did so. And this is not by any individual. Abu Sa'id Khudri or Khidri, he is the one who's narrating this hadith. Second, another tradition which is in complete contradiction with Quran. What is that tradition? This tradition, you will hear this tradition and you will say, wow, that this is something which is associated with Rasulullah. It says, again in Bukhari, in Sahih Bukhari, volume 4, page 269, hadith 3558. He says, Ibn Abbas is being narrating, وَكَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يُحِبُّ مُؤَافِقَةَ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ فِيمَا لَمْ يُؤْمَرْ فِيهِ بِشَيْءٍ. That Rasulullah used to prefer to follow the people of the book, Ahl Kitab, in affairs where he has not been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anything. So Allah has not said anything about fasting, but he would prefer to follow the Jews or the Christians in this regard. But the hadith says he used to follow them, especially, the next hadith says, especially when it conflicted with the idol worshippers. So it was something that idol worshippers weren't doing, but Ahl Kitab were doing, because Ahl Kitab were the followers of the divine religion. Rasulullah would follow them. This goes completely against not just other ahadith in this regard, but also the ayat of Quran. It says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattakhidul yahuda wan nasara awliya. Oh, those who believe. This is not just for mu'mineen. This is for the one who's Amir of mu'mineen as well. It's not just for you and I as mu'mineen, but Amir al-mu'mineen will also be following this. La tattakhidul yahuda wan. How is it profit in regards to that which Allah has not ordered him? The Quran says, Ma yantiqu anil hawa in huwa illa wahyun yuha. He does not say anything except what we ask him to say. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. O Prophet, you did not throw those pebbles. We were throwing them. Allah is taking responsibility for the actions of Rasulullah and the kalam of Rasulullah from Quran. He's telling him not to follow Yahud and Nasara in their practices. Yet, this hadith is saying that Rasulullah preferred, yuhibbu. This is in Sahih Bukhari, not any other book. I gave you the hawala. That Rasulullah used to follow, yuhibbu mu'afiqata ahlil kitab. He used to prefer following ahlil kitab, especially when it was something that went against the following of ahlul awthan, those who were idol worshippers. This is where we see, same people who are giving these ahadith. For example, Ibn Hajar said, Prophet emphasized so much about fasting to the extent that people would make their children fast as well on Ashura. That was the extent of it. Same Ibn Hajar says in another hadith, La tashabbuhu bil Yahud wan Nasara. One who's saying Rasulullah used to follow the Yahud and Nasara, preferred following them. He quotes a hadith in his same book, Fathul Bari. He says, La tashabbuhu bil Yahud wan Nasara. Do not copy or follow or resemble or act or prefer, as far as the actions are concerned, Yahud and Nasara. Here, very quickly, in a couple of minutes, I know I'm running out of my time, we want to clarify from their own books, from the books of Ahl Sunnah, how some of these things are contradictory. Fakhr Razi, great scholar of Ahl Sunnah, he says this, سَأَنَّ عُمَرْ تَعَلَعَ وَرَقَةً مِنَ التَّوْرَاتِ فَغَضَبَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. Second Khalifa was reading some awraq from Tawrat. غَضَبَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. Prophet became infuriated. He was angry. That why are you reading them? وَقَالَ لَوْ كَانَ مُوسَى حَيًّا لَمَّا وَسَعَهُ إِلَّا اتِّبَاعِي وَلَمَّا لَمْ يَكُنْ كَذَلِكَ عَلِمْنَا أَنَّهُ لَمْ يَكُنْ مُتَعَبِّدًا بِالشَّرْعِ أَحَدِ الْحُجَّةِ. He says, Umar, why are you reciting this? If Musa was alive today, even he would have followed me. Why are you following that which is matruk? Yeah, as far as your, gaining knowledge is concerned, that's another thing. But you read and then you start adopting that is something which is not allowed. Also, in other place it says, "Lam yakun muta'abbidan qabla an-nubuwwa wala ba'daha bi shari'atihi." He was not following any other shariat prior to his nubuwwat. According to them, he became Nabi at the age of 40, prior to the nubuwwat or after the nubuwwat. Again, this is by Abul Hussein Basri in his book Al-Mu'tamad. He says he was not following any other shariat prior to it or afterwards. So this is just to defend what Rasulullah has been accused of and ascribed of in their books by their own scholars, Fakhr Razi and other people who are trying to defend Rasulullah. Lastly, there are also, after having proven that it had nothing to do with the day the Jews used to fast, It wasn't something that existed prior to Islam. It wasn't something that became mustahab when Prophet entered Medina. We see that when we refer to history, we understand the change of the year in the Jewish calendar is not entirely based on the lunar calendar the way we have the lunar calendar. So it would be very, very improbable for 10th of Muharram to fall on the same day that they perform their fast. When do they perform their fast? Yom Kippur, right? Yom Kippur is basically Yom Kaffara. In Arabic, it's Yom Kaffara, the day of atonement. That's when they fast. It falls on the 10th day of their 7th month, Tashrin al-Awwal, which is September or October. Every year it's going to be in September or October when it falls. So they're not following the lunar calendar. How is it possible for the 10th of Muharram to fall on the same day that the Jews used to fast? Jews used to fast on the day which is known as Yom Kippur, Yom Kaffara. Secondly, we also look at it from this aspect that this is being mentioned by Tabari. According to Tabari in his Tarikh, and Ibn Athir in his Kamil fi Tarikh, Ibn Hajar Asqalani in Fath Bari of Sahih Bukhari, he said that the day when Prophet entered Medina, these people are saying, according to the hadith, Prophet entered Medina and he saw Jews fasting. It was only one day, right? One day or so that they would fast. So he must have run into them the day he entered, they were fasting. He said, but Prophet, when he entered, according to these three books that I mentioned, and I have the Hawala as well, Tarikh al-Tabari, Ibn Athir's Al-Kamil, and Asqalani's Fath al-Bari. He says, they say that the day Prophet entered Medina after migration from Mecca was Monday, 12th of Rabiul Awwal. Was not even close to the 10th of Muharram. So again, this is something which we see a fabrication from the large factory of the fabrications that came from the factory of Banu Umayyah.